The Arizona desert had a way of showing you exactly how small you were. Naomi Fletcher had learned that lesson every single day for the past year, ever since the fever took her parents and left her alone in the old adobe trading post that sat like a sun-bleached skull in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town, Prescott, was a full day's ride north, and the only visitors she ever saw were the occasional prospector or cavalry patrol passing through on their way to somewhere more important. Today, the desert was angry. Naomi had seen the wall of dust approaching since mid-morning, a brown-orange monster rolling across the barren landscape like something alive and vengeful. She had maybe an hour before it hit, and she moved quickly to secure everything that could blow away. The chickens went into their reinforced coop. The well was covered with its heavy wooden lid, and every shutter on the trading post was latched tight. Her father had built this place to withstand the desert's fury, and so far it had never failed her. She was dragging the last water barrel inside when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the wind. A groan, low and pained, carried on a gust that kicked up sand against her face. Naomi froze, listening. There it was again, coming from somewhere beyond the old corral where her two mules stood nervously. The sensible thing would be to ignore it. The storm was coming, and anyone caught outside would have to fend for themselves. That was desert law. You looked after yourself first because nobody else would. But Naomi's mother had raised her with different laws, ones that said you helped people when they needed help, regardless of the cost or convenience. She grabbed a cloth, wrapped it around her face to protect against the blowing sand, and moved toward the sound. The wind was picking up now, hot and gritty, carrying the smell of dust and creosote. Visibility was already dropping, the world turning brown and hazy. She squinted against the stinging sand and kept moving. What she found behind the corral made her blood run cold. A man, no, barely more than a boy, maybe 18 or 19, lay collapsed in the dirt. His wrists were bound in iron chains that were staked deep into the hard ground, stretching his arms above his head in a position that must have been agonizing. His ankles were similarly chained and staked. He wore only torn cloth pants, his torso bare and marked with fresh wounds and older scars. His long black hair was matted with blood and dust, and his bronze skin was burned dark by the merciless sun, but it was his face that told Naomi everything she needed to know about who he was and why he was here. High cheekbones, strong features, and even unconscious. A dignity that seemed carved from stone. Apache, and from the look of the chains and the way he'd been staked out like bait, someone wanted him to die slowly and painfully. Naomi's heart pounded. The Apache were feared throughout Arizona territory. Warriors who knew the desert like no white man ever could, who fought fiercely to protect their ancestral lands from the endless tide of settlers and soldiers. The stories she'd heard painted them as merciless savages, enemies of civilization, threats to be eliminated. But looking at this young man chained and bleeding in the dirt, left to die of thirst and exposure, all Naomi could see was cruelty, and not from the Apache side. The storm was minutes away now. She could stay here deliberating, or she could act. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. We're all just people trying to survive. And Naomi, never forget that. She ran back to the trading post and grabbed her father's tools, a hammer and chisel, heavy and awkward in her hands. The wind was howling now, the wall of dust looming so close it blocked out half the sky. She stumbled back to where the warrior lay and dropped to her knees beside the stakes holding his wrist chains. The iron was driven deep, and the first few blows of her hammer seemed to accomplish nothing. Sand whipped around her, getting in her eyes and mouth despite the cloth covering her face. The young man stirred slightly, his eyes flickering open for just a moment. They were dark as obsidian, glazed with pain and dehydration, but in that brief instant they focused on her face with an intensity that made her breath catch. Then they closed again. "Stay with me," Naomi muttered, though she doubted he could hear her over the wind. She swung the hammer harder, and finally the first stake loosened. 3 more to go, and the storm was upon them now, the world dissolving into a brown fog of choking dust. She worked with desperate speed, her arms burning with effort. The second stake came free, then the third. The warrior's body was completely limp now, and Naomi wondered if she was already too late, if she was risking her own life for someone already beyond saving. But she kept working, and when the 4th stake finally pulled free, she grabbed the chains and tried to drag him. He was far heavier than she'd expected, dead weight made worse by the chains still binding his wrists and ankles together. The storm was a full roar now, visibility down to mere feet. Naomi could barely see the outline of the trading post, but she knew these grounds by heart. She hooked her arms under the warrior's shoulders and pulled with everything she had. Her boots sliding in the loose sand, her muscles screaming in protest, inch by inch. Foot by foot, she dragged him toward shelter. The distance couldn't have been more than 50 yards, but it felt like miles. Sand filled her mouth and nose. Her eyes burned. Her back felt like it might break. But she kept pulling, kept moving, because stopping meant they would both die out here. The door of the trading post appeared like a miracle through the brown haze. Naomi shouldered it open and dragged the warrior inside, then used her last reserves of strength to push the heavy door closed against the wind. The sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the muffled howl of the storm outside and her own ragged breathing. She collapsed beside the unconscious warrior, coughing up dust, every muscle in her body trembling with exhaustion. For several minutes she just lay there, too spent to move. Then she forced herself up and lit a lamp with shaking hands. In the flickering light, she could finally see the full extent of his injuries. His back was a mess of whip marks, some fresh and bleeding, others partially healed. The chains had cut deep into his wrists and ankles, leaving raw wounds that were already infected. His lips were cracked and bleeding from thirst, and his breathing was shallow and labored. Whoever had done this to him had meant for him to suffer before he died. Naomi knew she should be afraid. She had an Apache warrior in her home, unconscious and chained but still potentially dangerous. If anyone from Prescott found out, they'd call her a traitor or worse. The cavalry would arrest her. The townsfolk would shun her. But as she looked at his ravaged body and thought about the cruelty it took to chain a human being in the desert sun to die slowly, she felt only anger and determination. "All right," she said aloud, as much to steady herself as anything. First things first, water. She fetched a tin cup and carefully lifted his head, dribbling water between his cracked lips. He coughed weakly but swallowed, then swallowed again as she patiently gave him more. Not too much. Her father had taught her that someone severely dehydrated needed water slowly, or it would make them sick. Next, she tackled the chains. The locks were crude but sturdy, designed to be secure rather than sophisticated. She didn't have keys, but she had her father's lock-picking tools, skills he'd learned as a locksmith back east before they'd come west. It took 20 minutes of careful work, but finally the wrist shackles clicked open, then the ankle chains. She pulled the iron away and saw the raw, bloody circles they'd left behind. The storm raged outside as Naomi worked through the night. She cleaned his wounds with water and whiskey, wincing at the damage. She applied salve her mother had made from desert plants, remedies learned from a Navajo woman who used to trade at the post. She bandaged the worst injuries and covered him with blankets, trying to bring his body temperature back to normal after the extreme exposure. As dawn approached and the storm finally began to subside, the warrior stirred. His eyes opened slowly, and this time they stayed open, focusing on Naomi where she sat nearby, exhausted and covered in dust. For a long moment neither of them moved. She saw confusion in his expression, then wariness, then something that might have been amazement. He tried to sit up but gasped and fell back, his hand moving instinctively to his bandaged ribs. Naomi raised her hands in a peaceful gesture, though her heart hammered in her chest. She had no weapon within reach, stupid probably, but somehow she wasn't afraid. "You're safe," she said quietly, knowing he probably didn't understand English, but hoping her tone would convey meaning. "I won't hurt you. Nobody will hurt you here." He stared at her for another long moment, and she realized he was looking at the chains lying discarded in the corner, then at his bandaged wrists, then back at her face. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something that looked like disbelief. When he tried to speak, only a hoarse croak came out. Naomi quickly brought him more water, and this time he was conscious enough to take the cup himself, though his hands shook. He drank deeply, then met her eyes again. "Why?" he asked, and the single English word, rough and accented but clear, hung in the air between them. Naomi thought about all the reasons she could give. Because it was the right thing to do. Because he was human and deserved help. Because her mother would have wanted her to. But in the end, she answered with the simplest truth. "Because you needed help and I could give it." Something shifted in his expression. The wariness didn't disappear entirely, but it softened, replaced by what might have been respect. He nodded slowly, then winced at the pain the movement caused. "Takoda," he said, touching his chest lightly. "My name?" "Naomi," she replied, mirroring his gesture. "You should rest. Your body needs time to heal." He looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to get up and leave, but his body betrayed him. His eyes were already closing again, exhausted beyond endurance. Within moments he was asleep, his breathing deeper and more regular than before. Naomi sat watching him as the morning sun broke through the dissipating dust storm, painting the adobe walls gold. She had crossed a line today, one that most people in Arizona Territory would consider unforgivable. She had saved an Apache warrior, an enemy, someone she was supposed to fear and hate, but all she felt was a strange sense of peace and the certainty that she had done exactly what needed to be done. Outside, the desert was still, the storm passed, and inside the old trading post, two people from worlds that were supposed to be at war rested under the same roof, protected by walls of adobe and something far stronger, the simple human choice to show mercy when cruelty was expected. Naomi didn't know it yet, but her act of compassion had been witnessed. Someone had seen her drag the warrior to safety through the storm, and the following night, that witness would bring others to her door, warriors who would change her life in ways she could never have imagined. The day after the storm passed slowly, marked by the relentless Arizona sun climbing across a cloudless sky. Naomi moved quietly through the trading post, checking on her patient every hour. Takoda drifted in and out of consciousness, his body fighting infection and exhaustion. Each time he woke, Naomi was there with water or thin broth made from dried meat and desert herbs, and each time his dark eyes tracked her movements with a mixture of caution and something that might have been growing trust. By afternoon, he was awake longer, and the fever that had worried Naomi through the morning seemed to be breaking. She was changing the bandages on his wrists when he spoke, his voice still rough but stronger than before. "The men who chained me," he said carefully, each word deliberate. "They will come back." Naomi's hands stilled. "When? I do not know. They say 3 days, maybe 4. They want—" He struggled for the English word, then gestured toward his head in a way that made Naomi's stomach turn. "Scalp hunters. Bounty hunters who killed Apache for the reward money. Proof of kill measured in bloody trophies. They won't find you here," Naomi said firmly, though her mind was already racing. "And if they come, I'll tell them you escaped during the storm." Takoda studied her face with an intensity that made her uncomfortable. "Why you do this? Apache kill your people. Take land horses, maybe kill your family." It was a fair question, and Naomi took her time answering. She finished wrapping his wrist, then sat back on her heels. "The fever killed my family. My father and mother both, last year. They're buried out behind the well." She met his eyes steadily. "And yes, I've heard the stories about Apache raids, but I've also heard stories about what settlers and soldiers do to Apache villages. About women and children killed, about promises broken, about land stolen. Seems to me there's cruelty on both sides of this conflict. You are not afraid of me? Should I be?" He considered this, then shook his head slowly. "No, Takoda does not hurt those who help. This is honor." He touched his chest where the bandages covered his ribs. "You saved my life. Now I have debt, obligation." "You don't owe me anything," Naomi said quickly. "I helped because it was right, not because I wanted something in return." "I know." He nodded seriously. "That is why debt is sacred. You do not ask. This make it more important." Over the next hours, as Takoda's strength slowly returned, they talked. His English was limited but functional, learned from an army scout who had befriended him before the wars intensified. Naomi found herself fascinated by his perspective on the desert, a place she had come to see as harsh and unforgiving. He described as a mother who provided everything needed, if you knew how to listen and look. He told her about his people, the Chiricahua Apache, about their traditional lands in these mountains and canyons, about a way of life that was disappearing as more settlers arrived each year. He spoke of his family with a pain that Naomi recognized. His father had been killed by soldiers 2 years ago. His mother had died of white man's diseases. His younger sister was somewhere in the reservation system, and he didn't know if she was alive or dead. "I was scouting," he explained, "looking for good water, good camps for my people." The bounty hunters, They track me for 2 days. I am arrogant, think I am better tracker, but they know desert too, and they have rifles, long distance. They shoot my horse, then they catch me. His jaw tightened. They laugh when they chain me. Say Apache warrior dies slow like dog. They make bets on how long I live. Naomi felt sick. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that happened to you. Why you are sorry? You did not do this, no, but they're my people, white settlers, and they did something horrible. Dakota looked at her thoughtfully. You are not responsible for all white people. I am not responsible for all Apache. We are just ourselves. This is what my father teach me before he die. As evening approached, Dakota insisted on trying to stand. Naomi helped him, and though he was shaky and clearly in pain, he managed to stay upright. He moved slowly to the window and looked out at the desert landscape painted golden orange by the setting sun. I must go soon, he said quietly. Tonight, maybe tomorrow. Stay longer, bring danger to you. You're not strong enough yet. Those wounds will heal or not heal. But if those men come back and find me here, they kill you too. Maybe worse. He turned to face her, his expression grave. You understand? They not forgive you for helping Apache. They think you are traitor. Naomi knew he was right, but the thought of sending him back into the desert in his condition felt wrong. At least stay tonight, rest, take food and water when you go, and... She hesitated, then continued. There's an old mine about 5 miles north of here, abandoned silver mine. It has water from a spring, and it's well hidden. You could shelter there while you finish healing. You know this desert well. I've had a year to explore. Not much else to do out here alone. They ate together as darkness fell. Simple food, corn cakes, and dried meat. But Dakota ate like it was a feast. Naomi had prepared a pack for him. Water skins, food, clean bandages, some of her father's old clothes that might fit him. She was checking the contents when she heard it. Footsteps outside. Multiple footsteps, soft and deliberate, moving around the trading post in a pattern that spoke of trained warriors. Naomi's heart jumped into her throat. She grabbed her father's rifle and moved toward the window, but Dakota caught her arm. Wait, he said softly. His expression had changed, tension replaced by something like recognition. I know who this is. 3 sharp knocks sounded at the door. Then 2 more, then 1. Some kind of pattern, a signal. Dakota moved toward the door despite Naomi's whispered protest. He placed his palm flat against the wood and called out something in Apache, a string of words that sounded like music and stone combined. A voice answered from outside, speaking rapid Apache. Dakota responded, then turned to Naomi. My people. They see you save me in storm. They watch all day to know if you are enemy or friend. They want to talk. Naomi's hands trembled on the rifle. This was it. The moment when her decision to help Dakota would either be vindicated or would lead to disaster. She took a deep breath, set the rifle aside, and moved to the door. Tell them, she said quietly, that they're welcome in my home. Dakota spoke in Apache again, and after a moment, Naomi opened the door. 5 Apache warriors stood in the moonlight. They were dressed for travel, armed with rifles and bows, their faces painted with designs Naomi didn't recognize. But what struck her most was their bearing, not threatening exactly, but powerful, alert, every movement controlled and purposeful. The man in front was older, maybe 40, with gray threading through his long black hair and scars that spoke of many battles. His eyes swept over Naomi with an assessment that felt like it saw everything. Her fear, her determination, her honesty. Then he looked at Dakota and spoke a question. Dakota answered at length, gesturing toward Naomi several times. The older warrior listened, his expression giving nothing away. When Dakota finished, there was a long silence. Then the older warrior stepped forward and did something that took Naomi completely by surprise. He removed a leather cord from around his neck, from which hung a small carved stone, a bear beautifully detailed. He held it out to Naomi. Nantan gives you gift, Dakota translated. He is leader, war chief. This is his protection stone. He wear it 30 years. Now he give to you. It means you are protected by his honor. Any Apache see this, they know you are friend. They help you, protect you, as they would protect family. Naomi stared at the stone, then at the warrior called Nantan. His weathered face remained serious, but there was warmth in his eyes and respect. With shaking hands, she accepted the cord and placed it around her own neck. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to say." I don't deserve this." Dakota translated, and she saw approval in the warriors' faces. Nantan spoke once more briefly, then clasped Dakota's shoulder. The younger warrior looked torn. Clearly he wanted to go with his people, but his injuries were still serious. "They go now," Dakota explained. "They stay too long bring risk to you." But Nantan say I should stay 2 more days, let wounds heal more. He sent 2 warriors back in 3 days to take me home safely. The warriors filed out as silently as they'd arrived, but each one paused at the door to nod to Naomi, a gesture of respect that she returned. When they were gone, she and Dakota stood in the doorway, watching them disappear into the moonlit desert, like shadows dissolving into larger darkness. "Your people are remarkable," Naomi said softly. "Yes." "And now," Dakota said with something that might have been the beginning of a smile, "you are also my people. This is good thing. You not alone anymore, Naomi Fletcher. You have family now, strange family, dangerous family maybe, but family who honor you and protect you." That night, Naomi lay in her bed while Dakota rested on blankets near the fire, and she thought about the incredible turn her life had taken. 2 days ago, she had been utterly alone, surviving but not truly living. Now she had an alliance with Apache warriors, a friend recovering in her home, and a sacred stone around her neck that marked her as protected by people most of her countrymen considered mortal enemies. She didn't know what the future would bring, didn't know how she would navigate the dangerous line between her 2 worlds. But as she drifted off to sleep, one hand clasped around the bare stone, she felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Outside, the desert night was alive with stars, and somewhere in those vast spaces, Apache warriors were carrying word of the white girl who had shown mercy when mercy was unexpected. The following night had brought warriors to her door, not with violence but with gratitude and gifts, and Naomi Fletcher's life would never be the same. The next 2 days passed in a strange kind of peace. Dakota's strength returned gradually, and with it came a growing friendship that transcended the vast cultural divide between them. They talked for hours, about the desert, about survival, about the losses they'd both endured. Dakota taught Naomi words in Apache, and she helped him improve his English. They found they had more in common than either had expected. Both were young people, trying to make sense of a violent, changing world where the old ways were dying, and the future was uncertain. On the morning of the 3rd day, Dakota was strong enough to walk the perimeter of the trading post without assistance, though his movements were still careful, protective of his healing ribs. Naomi was showing him her garden, a struggling collection of vegetables that she coaxed from the reluctant desert soil, when he stopped suddenly, his body tensing. "What is it?" Naomi asked, following his gaze toward the northern horizon. "Dust riders coming." His voice was calm but alert. "Many riders." Naomi saw it now. A plume of dust rising against the bright blue sky, still several miles distant, but approaching steadily. Her heart began to race. Could be a cavalry patrol, or prospectors, or the men who chain me come back to check on their work. Dakota turned to her, his expression serious. "You must hide me. If they find me here, alive and healed, they know you helped me. This bring great danger to you." "No," Naomi said firmly. "I'm not hiding you like a criminal. You've done nothing wrong. Naomi, if they're bounty hunters, I'll tell them you escaped during the storm. If they're cavalry, I'll say the same. But I won't have you hiding in some cellar or closet like you're shameful. You're my guest and you're under my protection." She touched the stone around her neck, which she hadn't removed since receiving it. "Just like I'm under yours." Dakota looked like he wanted to argue, but something in her face stopped him. Instead, he nodded slowly. "You are very brave. Maybe too brave. But I understand. We face this together." They went back inside the trading post, and Naomi retrieved her father's rifle while Dakota positioned himself where he could see the door but wouldn't be immediately visible. They waited in tense silence as the dust cloud drew closer, the thunder of hoofbeats gradually becoming audible. When the riders finally arrived, Naomi counted 8 men, rough-looking characters with weather-beaten faces and an air of violence barely contained. Not cavalry, not prospectors. These were bounty hunters, and leading them was a man who made Naomi's skin crawl just looking at him. He was tall and rail-thin, with pale eyes that held no warmth and a smile that belonged on a snake. "Well, well," the man called out as he dismounted. "Looks like the little trading post is still standing. Storm didn't blow you away, girl." Naomi stepped out onto the porch, rifle held casually but ready. Storm passed. "We're fine here. What can I do for you, gentlemen?" The leader's smile widened, showing yellowed teeth. "Name's Cyrus Webb. We're tracking an escaped Apache, dangerous savage who attacked a settlement south of here. Killed 3 men, wounded 2 others. You seen any Apache around these parts?" It was a test, Naomi realized. He was watching her face carefully, looking for any tell. She met his eyes steadily and lied without hesitation. "Haven't seen anyone in weeks. Storm probably covered any tracks there might have been." "That's so." Webb walked closer, his men fanning out behind him with a coordination that spoke of experience. "Funny thing. We had an Apache chained up about a half-mile from here. Left him to think about his sins before we came back to collect. Came back yesterday after the storm, and damned if those chains weren't empty. Stakes pulled right out of the ground. Maybe he got lucky. Maybe the storm loosened the stakes." Naomi kept her voice level despite her pounding heart. Webb reached the porch steps but didn't climb them. Not yet. Or maybe someone helped him. Maybe someone who doesn't understand that helping Apache makes you a traitor. Makes you an enemy of civilization. His pale eyes bored into hers. Makes you someone who needs to be taught a lesson. "I don't know what you're talking about. If your prisoner escaped, that's your problem, not mine." One of the other men spoke up, a burly character with a scar across his nose. "Cyrus, maybe we should search the place. Make sure she ain't hiding him." "Oh, we'll search it," Webb agreed. "In fact, I think we'll search it real thorough-like. And while we're at it, maybe we'll find other things worth taking. Trading post like this, all alone out here, probably got some valuable supplies. Be a shame if it all just disappeared." Naomi's finger moved closer to the rifle's trigger. "This is private property. You've got no rights." Webb laughed and his men joined in. "Girl, we're 50 miles from the nearest law. Out here, rights are determined by who's got the most guns. And last I counted, that's us." He placed a boot on the bottom step. "Now why don't you put that rifle down before someone gets hurt?" "I wouldn't advise taking another step." The voice came from the doorway behind Naomi, and she felt a surge of relief mixed with terror. Dakota had emerged, and despite his bandages and healing wounds, he stood straight and strong, a bow in his hands with an arrow already nocked and drawn. The arrowhead gleamed in the sunlight. Its sharp edge pointed directly at Webb's chest. The transformation in the bounty hunters was instantaneous. Guns were drawn, hammers cocked, 8 weapons suddenly aimed at the porch. Webb's smile had vanished, replaced by a cold fury. "So you are hiding him? You stupid little girl. You just signed your own death warrant." "No," Dakota said, his English clear and firm. "She saved life of warrior who was left to die. This is honor, not crime. I am Dakota of the Chiricahua Apache, son of Naiche, grandson of Cochise. You chain me like animal and leave me for death. But this girl show mercy, show courage. Now she is protected by my people." "Protected?" Webb spat. "By a bunch of savage—" He didn't finish the sentence. An arrow whispered through the air and buried itself in the porch post exactly 1 inch from Webb's head. He flinched back, and suddenly there were more arrows, a dozen of them sprouting from the ground in a perfect circle around the bounty hunters. Naomi's breath caught as figures materialized from the desert itself. Apache warriors, at least 15 of them, rising from concealment with bows drawn and rifles raised. They must have been there all along, hidden in the rocks and scrub, waiting and watching. Nantan was there, and Casa, and the other warriors who had come 2 nights ago, along with several Naomi hadn't seen before. Nantan spoke in Apache, his voice carrying authority that needed no translation. But Dakota translated anyway, and there was satisfaction in his tone. "He say you are surrounded. Put down guns now or you die now. Choose quickly." The bounty hunters looked at each other, at the warriors surrounding them, at the arrows and rifles aimed with deadly precision. Slowly, reluctantly, weapons were lowered and then dropped to the ground. Webb's face was purple with rage, but even he wasn't stupid enough to fight against these odds. Nantan approached, and when he spoke this time, Dakota translated each word carefully. "He say you are cowards who chain wounded warrior and leave him to die slowly. This is not honorable way. You are like coyotes who attack the weak and run from the strong. He say you will leave now, and you will never come back to this place. This girl is under Apache protection. This place is sacred ground. Any man who harms her or takes from her will face all warriors of Chiricahua Apache. This is law now. You can't, Webb started. But Nantan cut him off with a sharp gesture and a stream of Apache that needed no translation. His tone made it clear. Argue and die. Take your horses, Dakota said. Go back to Prescott or wherever you crawl from. Tell other bounty hunters what you learn here. Some places are protected. Some people are not to be touched. Go now while you still can go. The bounty hunters mounted their horses with fumbling haste, leaving their weapons on the ground. As they turned to ride away, Webb looked back at Naomi with such hatred in his pale eyes that she felt it like a physical touch. This ain't over, he called out. You made your choice, girl. You chose the wrong side. When the army hears about this, when Prescott hears about this, you'll wish you'd never been born, Nantan spoke sharply. And one of the younger warriors moved forward with startling speed, grabbing Webb's horse's bridle. The warrior said something in Apache, his voice low and threatening, then released the horse with a shove. Webb needed no further encouragement. He spurred his mount and galloped north, his men following in a cloud of dust and humiliation. The Apache warriors watched until the riders disappeared over the horizon, then began to lower their weapons. Nantan turned to Naomi and spoke at length, his expression serious but not unkind. Dakota translated, his own relief evident in his voice. He say they watch since we arrived 3 days ago. Always warriors nearby, making sure you stay safe while I heal. When they see bounty hunters coming, they prepare for battle. He say you show great courage facing those men. Not many white people stand against their own kind to protect Apache. I wasn't protecting Apache, Naomi said quietly. I was protecting a friend, and defending my home. When this was translated, several of the warriors nodded approvingly. Casa stepped forward and spoke, gesturing toward the trading post and then toward the horizon. Dakota listened, then turned to Naomi with an expression that was both grateful and sad. Casa say the bounty hunters speak truth about one thing. Word will spread. Town of Prescott will hear that you protect Apache warrior. This bring trouble. Maybe soldiers come. Maybe more bounty hunters. Maybe settlers who fear Apache will turn against you. He paused, clearly struggling with what to say next. He say, you should come with us. Live with our people. We protect you, teach you our ways. You be safe. Naomi looked around at the trading post. Her home, her parents' dream, the only life she knew. Then she looked at the faces of the Apache warriors, seeing genuine concern and welcome in their expressions. It was tempting, so tempting to accept that offer of safety and community. Tell them, she said slowly, that I'm honored, truly honored. But this is my home. My parents are buried here. Their dreams are here. I can't just abandon it. She touched the bare stone around her neck. But I also can't go back to Prescott now. Webb will spread his story, and you're right. There will be consequences. So I need to find a new path, somewhere between their world and yours, Dakota translated, and Nantan responded with what sounded like understanding. He spoke for several minutes, occasionally gesturing toward the mountains, toward the trading post, toward Naomi herself. When he finished, Dakota's face showed a mixture of surprise and approval. He say you are wise beyond your years. He say you are right. There must be path between two worlds, or there is only war until one side is destroyed. He has solution if you are willing. I'm listening. Your trading post, it become what it was meant to be, a place of trade, but different now. Apache come here to trade, learn about white man's ways. White people who are not filled with hate, they come here to trade, learn about Apache ways. You be bridge, connection between two peoples. We bring furs, herbs, baskets, things white traders want. You teach us about their world, help us understand what is coming. You also teach your people about us, show them we are not savages but human beings trying to survive. Naomi felt her heart begin to race. It was dangerous, potentially impossible, but it was also exactly right. A trading post that serves both peoples, a neutral ground. Yes, Nantan say he will spread word among Apache. This place is safe for trading, safe for learning. No violence here, no weapons raised. Sacred ground where enemies can meet as equals. But, Dakota's expression grew serious, you must understand. This is dangerous path. Some white people will hate you for trading with Apache. Some Apache will distrust you because you are white. You will be rejected by both sides sometimes. But maybe, Naomi said softly, Just maybe I can help both sides see each other as human. Maybe I can save some lives, prevent some violence. Maybe this place can be what my father always dreamed, a true trading post, where people come together instead of tearing each other apart. Nantan stepped forward and placed both hands on Naomi's shoulders, looking into her eyes with an intensity that felt like it could see into her soul. He spoke, his voice formal and solemn, and Takoda translated with equal gravity. He say you are now adopted daughter of Chiricahua Apache. This is great honor, rarely given to outsiders. You keep your name, keep your ways, but you also have Apache name now, Istzan Cheshtai. It means woman who shows courage. You are part of two peoples now. Sister to Apache, daughter to settlers, bridge between worlds. He say this is sacred responsibility, and he trusts you to carry it with honor. Tears streamed down Naomi's face as she bowed her head in acknowledgement of the honor. When she looked up, she saw that several of the warriors were smiling, genuine smiles of warmth and acceptance that transformed their fierce faces. Over the next few hours, the warriors helped Naomi and Takoda prepare the trading post for its new purpose. They brought gifts of beautifully crafted items, baskets woven with intricate patterns, tanned hides of exceptional quality, dried herbs and medicines, turquoise stones and silverwork. These would be Naomi's initial trading stock, proof that she had goods worth traveling for. Kasa worked with her to create a display system that showed respect for both cultures, while another warrior taught her the basics of Apache language, words for greeting, for friendship, for trade, for peace. Takoda helped her draft a message that would be spread to white settlements, a notice that the Fletcher Trading Post welcomed all peaceful visitors and offered fair trade for quality goods. As the sun began to set, painting the desert in shades of amber and gold, the warriors prepared to leave. Takoda would go with them. He was healed enough now to travel, and his people needed him. But there was a new understanding between him and Naomi, a bond forged in blood and mercy and shared danger. I will visit, he promised, as they stood outside the trading post. When I am in this territory, I will come here. Bring trade goods, bring news, make sure you are safe. And I'll be here, Naomi replied, building something new, something that honors both our peoples. Takoda pulled something from his belt, a knife in a beautifully beaded sheath. My mother made this. She died 3 winters ago, but her work lives on. I want you to have it. For protection, yes, but also to remember, good people exist in all tribes. Your mother teach you this. My mother teach me this. Now we teach others. Naomi accepted the knife with reverence, understanding the weight of the gift. I'll treasure it, and I'll remember, Nantan called out, and Takoda clasped Naomi's shoulder in farewell. Be careful, Istzan Cheshtai. The path you walk is narrow and dangerous, but it is also path of honor. Walk it well. She watched as the warriors melted into the desert twilight, their figures becoming shadows and then disappearing entirely. When they were gone, she stood alone in the doorway of her trading post, one hand on the bare stone around her neck, the other on the knife at her belt, symbols of the bridges she had chosen to build. The desert night fell around her, but Naomi no longer felt alone. She had a purpose now, a mission that was larger than simple survival. She would be the bridge between two worlds at war, the place where enemies could meet as equals, the living proof that courage and compassion could transcend hatred and fear. It wouldn't be easy. She knew that. There would be challenges, dangers, rejections from both sides. But as she looked up at the stars beginning to emerge in the darkening sky, Naomi felt something she hadn't felt since before her parents died. She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. The following night had brought warriors to her door, not with violence but with respect and honor. And from that moment forward, Naomi Fletcher's trading post would become something unprecedented in Arizona territory, a place where Apache and white settlers could meet in peace, trade in fairness, and learn to see the humanity in each other. The old world was dying, yes, but from its ashes something new was being born, and Naomi would be at its heart, the orphan girl who had unchained a warrior, and in doing so had begun to unlock the chains of hatred that bound two peoples in endless conflict. 6 months passed, and the Fletcher trading post transformed beyond anything Naomi could have imagined. Word spread slowly at first. Whispers among Apache camps about the white girl who could be trusted. Rumors in Prescott, and surrounding settlements about the strange trading post where peaceful Apache were welcome. Some dismissed the stories as fantasy, others as treason, but gradually, carefully, people began to come. The first white customer was an elderly prospector named Samuel Finch, who arrived one morning leading a tired mule and looking skeptical. He had heard about the Apache-made baskets and wanted to see if they were worth the risk of visiting a savage-friendly establishment. Naomi had been nervous, but she showed him her inventory with quiet pride. The intricately woven baskets, the beautifully tanned deer hides, the silverwork that gleamed in the Arizona sunlight. Samuel examined each item with an expert's eye, and she could see the moment his prejudice collided with the undeniable quality of the craftsmanship. "I'll be damned," he muttered, running his weathered hand over a basket's perfect geometric patterns. "This is finer work than anything I've seen in Prescott. How much you asking?" They negotiated a fair price, and Samuel left with 3 baskets and a deer hide, shaking his head in wonder. But 2 weeks later, he returned with 2 friends, and this time they brought copper ore to trade. "The Apache know these mountains better than anyone," Samuel had said pragmatically. "Figured they might want copper for their silver work. Might as well make this arrangement work for everyone." That was how it began, one pragmatic transaction at a time. Apache visitors came too, usually arriving at dawn or dusk when the desert heat was manageable. They brought furs and herbs, baskets and beadwork, and in exchange took coffee, sugar, metal tools and fabric. But more than the trading, they came for information. Naomi found herself becoming an interpreter of 2 worlds. She explained to Apache visitors about the politics of the territory, about the army's movements, about which settlements were hostile and which might be approachable. To white visitors, she shared Apache perspectives, their connection to the land, their complex social structures, their very human concerns about family and survival. It was delicate work, requiring constant diplomacy. There were close calls and tense moments. Once a young cavalry lieutenant arrived, while an Apache woman was inside trading herbs for flour. Naomi had held her breath as the 2 eyed each other warily, but the lieutenant had respected the neutrality of the trading post and waited outside until the Apache woman left. Afterward, he had purchased some of her goods and said quietly, "My commanding officer won't like this, but I served in the Indian Wars back east. I'm tired of killing. If you're building something different here, I'll respect it." Dakota visited 3 times during those 6 months, each time bringing news from the Apache camps and taking back information about the changing territory. Their friendship deepened, built on mutual respect and a shared vision of a more peaceful future. On his 3rd visit, he brought his cousin, a young woman named Nasha, who was curious about the white girl everyone was talking about. "My cousin thinks I make you up," Dakota had said with rare humor. "She say no white person can be trusted. Like I say, you can be trusted." Nasha had spent a day at the trading post, watching Naomi work, asking pointed questions through Dakota's translation, testing the sincerity of this bridge between worlds. By evening, she was smiling, and when she left, she pressed a small turquoise pendant into Naomi's hand. "For a woman who shows courage," she had said in careful English. "You are real. This is good." But not everyone was supportive. In Prescott, Naomi's reputation became complicated. Some saw her as a traitor, others as a curiosity, still others as a pragmatic businesswoman making the best of a difficult situation. She made monthly trips to town for supplies she couldn't get through trading, and these visits grew increasingly uncomfortable. On one such trip, 8 months after freeing Dakota, she encountered Cyrus Webb again. He was standing outside the general store with several men, and when he saw her, his pale eyes lit with malicious satisfaction. "Well, if it isn't the Apache lover," he called out loudly enough for the whole street to hear. "How's business, traitor? Making good money selling out your own people?" Naomi kept walking, her hand instinctively touching the bare stone hidden beneath her collar. But Webb stepped into her path, his companions forming a loose circle around her. "I'm talking to you, girl. You think you're something special because you've got savages protecting you? Let me tell you something. That protection only works out there in the desert. Here in civilization, you're just a foolish child playing a dangerous game. Let me pass, Mr. Webb. Or what? You'll sick your Apache friends on me. In the middle of Prescott." He laughed and his men joined in. "See, that's the problem with your little experiment. It only works as long as both sides let it work. And there are a lot of us who think it's time to shut down your trading post and teach you a lesson about loyalty. That's enough. Cyrus? The new voice came from behind Webb, and Naomi felt a surge of relief as Marshal Tom Clayton pushed through the crowd. He was a fair man, one of the few law enforcement officers who seemed to see Apache as human beings rather than vermin to be exterminated. The girl's breaking no laws, Clayton continued, his hand resting casually on his gun belt. Trading with Apache ain't illegal, and her post is outside town jurisdiction anyway. You got a problem with her, you take it up with the territorial government. But you don't harass her on my streets, clear? Webb's face darkened, but he stepped aside. As Naomi hurried past, she heard him mutter just loud enough for her to hear. Enjoy your protection while it lasts, girl. Things are changing in this territory. War's coming whether you like it or not. And when it does, there won't be any neutral ground left. The words haunted her on the ride back to the trading post. Webb was right about one thing. Tensions were escalating. More settlers arrived every month, pushing further into Apache territory. The army was under increasing pressure to solve the Apache problem through force. Several young Apache warriors had formed raiding parties, striking at settlements in retaliation for broken treaties and stolen land. Her little trading post was an island of peace in a rising tide of violence, and she wasn't naive enough to think it could last forever. But she also wasn't willing to give up without trying everything possible to maintain it. That evening, as she sat on her porch watching the sunset, she heard the familiar sound of approaching horses. But these weren't Apache ponies moving silently through the desert. These were army horses, and there were a lot of them. Naomi stood as a cavalry column rode into view, at least 30 soldiers led by an officer she didn't recognize. Her heart sank. This was different from the occasional lieutenant stopping by. This was official business, and it probably wasn't good. The officer dismounted with military precision. He was perhaps 40, with steel-gray hair and eyes that assessed everything like a tactical problem to be solved. Miss Fletcher. I'm Captain Marcus Hendricks, U.S. Cavalry. I need to speak with you about your trading arrangements with hostile Apache. They're not hostile when they come here, Captain. That's the whole point. Perhaps we could discuss this inside. They sat in the trading post's main room, and Naomi offered coffee, which Hendricks accepted with a nod of thanks. His men waited outside, maintaining a perimeter that spoke of training and discipline. I'll be direct, Miss Fletcher. The Army has been aware of your trading post for some months now. We've been observing the situation, trying to determine if you're a problem or a potential asset. And which have you decided? That's what I'm here to find out. He sipped his coffee, his expression thoughtful. You've created something unique here, a place where Apache and whites interact peacefully. On one hand, that's admirable. On the other hand, you're providing supplies to people who might use those supplies against settlers. I don't trade weapons or ammunition, Captain. Never have, never will. I trade cloth, coffee, sugar, basic tools. The same things any store in Prescott would sell. But you also trade information, don't you? You tell Apache about army movements, about which settlements are vulnerable. Naomi met his eyes steadily. I tell them which settlements are hostile so they can avoid them. I tell them when army patrols are nearby so they can stay away and avoid conflict. I've prevented violence, Captain, not encouraged it. Hendricks studied her for a long moment. I believe you. And that's why I'm here to make you an offer, instead of shutting you down. Naomi's eyebrows rose. An offer? The Army needs scouts and interpreters, people who understand both cultures and can facilitate communication. You've built relationships with Apache that most officers spend years trying to achieve. I'm authorized to offer you a position as a civilian contractor, a liaison between the Army and peaceful Apache bands. You'd help us identify which groups are willing to negotiate, which might be convinced to move to reservations voluntarily, which are truly hostile. In exchange, you'd receive Army protection and a substantial salary. It was tempting. Army protection would solve many of her problems. But Naomi shook her head slowly. I appreciate the offer, Captain, but I have to decline. Why? You'd be doing the same thing you're doing now, but with official sanction and resources.